Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. This is Marta's Sci-Fi Seminar, and this is the first video of about a dozen that will be about the practice of drafting your first novel. Our previous videos, we've covered a lot of pre-writing strategies. We've talked about inspiration, we've talked about brainstorming, we've talked about outlining. And now we're actually going to talk about putting words on paper. For a lot of you, this is the scary part. My hope is that now that you've got some brainstorming ideas, now that you've got some basic outline concepts, however much or however little that amounts to for you, that things are less scary because you have a lot of material already in front of you. I would also say, previously I have recommended, if you're traveling light, Walter Mosley's two excellent style guides, This Year You Write Your Novel and Elements of Fiction, are great companions. Mosley actually covers this stage of the draft in Elements of Fiction, and he advises us all to think about the blank page as a pond into which we get to jump or tiptoe or swim or dive. However you wish to enter, that blank page is this beautiful, still pond that's so inviting, and it's just waiting for you to come and play. And I think that's such a terrific attitude about the beginning of a project. This is your chance to have fun. These are your ideas. This is your novel. You better enjoy it. So that's the beginning. For me, drafting is in some fundamental ways a numbers game. I usually sketch out about how many chapters, about how many words in the draft, about how many words per chapter, and then even approximately how many words per scene. I've talked previously about the Excel spreadsheet I use to track things. I do also track word counts by chapter and sometimes by scene. Most of my chapters are around 2,500 words. That means 20-some chapters for a novel of around 60 to 70,000 words. That's worked out pretty well for me both times so far. The novella I'm in is going to be shorter than that, obviously, and I'm considering breaking things down differently. But I've liked that basic numerical structure to tell me, all right, so then if my novel is going to be about 60,000 words, then by the time I'm at 30,000 words, I'm halfway. If 30,000 words is halfway, then about 15,000 words is a quarter of the way into it. So for me, that's been very helpful to kind of gauge, all right, I'm this far, I'm this far, I'm this far. And then if I'm outlining a few scenes ahead, I kind of know about how many words to get from this part of the gap to that other end of the gap at the midpoint, from the quarter point to the midpoint, or what have you. So I find those kinds of numbers helpful. Some of you may not. Similarly, when we're talking about scene length, almost any work is going to have scenes that are longer and scenes that are shorter. If you're doing suspense and thriller, you're probably working in shorter scenes. If you're doing a lot of more elaborate world building, then you may have some longer scenes, but you don't want them to go too long. Setting and thick description, no matter how lush and how wonderful, you're going to have some readers drop off if there isn't also some action, if there aren't also some ways in which the book is moving forward. So with that in mind, I would say a short scene is in the neighborhood of 500 words. A medium length scene is around 1,500 words. And a longer scene, 2,500 words. By the time you're at 3,500 words, 3,500 words for a single scene, that's a really long scene. I've written a couple scenes that might approach that length, but not a lot of them. And I tend to have at least one or two big party scenes in any book I'm writing. They're at a barbecue and there are lots of things going on in the background, and there's an interpolation of a kind of feast or festival scene happening in a parallel world, and all this is all woven together, and all that is under 3,500 words. It might be between 2,800 and 3,000 words, but even a scene like that with lots of moving parts, I don't like to have it go much longer than that, because I don't want my readers, don't want any of you who might be my readers, to be bored. I want you to feel like the story keeps moving forward. Probably also a good time to say I have not been good on the channel at mentioning my full name or the titles of my books, so I will do that now and say I am Marta Ferguson, the author of the Mystic Match Mysteries. The first two titles are Demeter West and the Ghost Town Glitch, and Demeter West and the Absent Presence. The novella I'm working on doesn't have a final title yet, so I will make that clear when it is available. Let's see. I need to say a word about a topic I have not covered in pre-writing, and there's a reason I have not covered it in pre-writing, and that reason is I'm assuming for most of you watching this, this is a first novel. So I did not do a pre-writing session on research. I know already there are some of you just scattering. There are some of you who haven't scattered because you're frozen in panic. And there are others of you who are like, why? Why would you not have covered something as critical as research? And we're breathing. Everybody breathing. I'm gonna say a thing a lot of you won't like. I don't think it's a good idea to do a ton of research for your first novel. There will be enough to do just to figure out how to write the thing without figuring out how to gracefully weave in a whole lot of research on a brand new topic. So, this is the sci-fi channel. This is science fiction, fantasy, paranormal, urban fantasy, you know, all of the speculative fiction stuff. And a lot of that can involve a lot of research and a lot of world building. You can spend years researching and world building, and I'm here to tell you not to. Really, especially for the first novel. One, because the temptation to research endlessly without producing any writing is real. I know lots and lots of folks who began researching their first novels years ago and are still researching for their first novels, and probably are always going to be researching for their first novels without actually writing those novels. You don't want that to be you. You want to actually write your book. So my suggestion is, don't do a ton of research for the first novel. Start with things that you could make sound plausible based on what you do. Maybe you have a background in medicine, maybe you have some engineering knowledge. What can you extrapolate from those things? Maybe in terms of urban fantasy, you have this great setting in mind. You know, play with those things. Go with something that, and I really love, there was an essay in the book of science fiction and fantasy essays I recommended. I think it was Norman Spinrad, who said, we're really not looking for truth here when we read fiction, especially, you know, adventurous science fictional fiction. We are looking for verisimilitude, things that could plausibly be true, but maybe not exactly true. And in a world where you get to make an awful lot of things up, that verisimilitude might serve you better than years of researching for truth. Okay? If you do feel like you have to do some research, then that's going to add to the reading load that you're doing in addition to the writing. And it's perfectly okay. In the books I write, I use a lot of tarot work. I already know a lot about tarot. I've been doing it 20-some years. So I might have to look up individual things about tarot work, like oh yeah, what does that deck look like? And might need to refresh my memory and look at some pictures of, say, the Robin Wood Tarot. But I don't have to figure out how tarot as a system works. I also include scenes where they're training dogs. Well, hey, I've done dog training. So for instance, I needed to look up like how, refresh my memory on how the agility track was laid out. So that I would get the order of things on the track correct. But my dog and I had already played with an agility track many times. So I didn't need to research on how do you train a dog? How do you get a dog? What do you do with a dog in an agility track? I just had to double check, how do all those pieces fit together? My hope is for this, your first novel, that's the level of research you're setting up for yourself. Just those short things you can look up. You don't even have to look them up before you draft your novel. You can make a note, you can say what you think it is, and then make yourself a note in the margin or even highlight it in your text that you need to look that up and check it. But I strongly, strongly recommend not overdoing it on the research for a first novel, even though we're talking about science fiction and fantasy. I think it will save you a lot of grief. Recommendations. Promised I would try to include lots of recommendations, especially from writers who come from the LGBTQIA+ community or writers of color. So I have a novella recommendation, actually, and I think it was the 2020 Hugo winner for the novella. This is How You Lose the Time War, which is by Amal, El-Mohtar, and Max Gladstone. And it is chiefly written in letters back and forth between two enemy agents in a time war. Pretty fantastic stuff, very much on the poetic and literary end of the science fiction spectrum, but a great deal of really fun, extrapolative, it's kind of mech tech versus biotech as things develop. The garden biotech versus the agency, more mech tech, although we see that neither of those things is absolute in the way the time war works. My other recommendation is the Dead Djinn Universe. There's a short story, a novella, and as of a week or so ago, there's now a novel in P. Djeli Clark's Dead Djinn Universe. Clark is somebody I discovered last year. He's one of the new Black science fiction writers finally getting more attention and more traction in genre. The Dead Djinn in Cairo short story, which came out I think in 2018, is fantastic. The audio is wonderful. I'm not going to remember the narrator's name just now, but I will put her name also in the comments. I highly recommend the audiobook of Dead Djinn in Cairo. The Haunting of Tramcar 15 is the novella, and the brand new novel is A Master of Djinn. And I've been waiting for it ever since I read Dead Djinn in Cairo early last year. So it's a really fun series. It is steampunk. If you're a steampunk fan, the notion is that this is steampunk Cairo. When the Europeans invaded North Africa in Clark's history, instead of conquering and furthering their empires in Egypt and across North Africa, the European colonizers were repelled not only by the residents, but by all these creatures out of mythology who rose up to fight alongside the residents of those North African nations. And so we're getting Egypt uncolonized, and steampunk Cairo full of myth and magic and technology. It's really amazing. In Clark's real life, he's a history professor, and it shows. The details are just brilliant. I love steampunk that can really go deep on the history. And this plays with all kinds of wonderful possibilities in that way. So those are my recommendations. And now go forth and make words. I will be checking in on this channel every 2 weeks, and I'm gonna set the expectation that you're gonna be able to produce 2,500 words a week as a draft, about a chapter a week. That means 5,000 words between videos. If that pace is too much, just save the videos for later. If the news about the research thing has been shattering, save the videos for later. If you feel like you really do have to do some research, well, do some of that and then come back. But remember, research never ends. It's better to just go forward and check on things. And for this first time around, figure out the mechanics of how to do this novel writing thing, which is itself an amazing accomplishment. But I believe you all can do it. I really do. I'm not going to say it's not difficult, but I believe that if you really want to do it, you really can. You just have to put the words on paper. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.